Welcome to Madlit Musings, the podcast where we dive into the minds of authors, exploring the profound realms of faith, social issues, and the delightful world of entertainment. I'm your host, Jaime Wright, and on this literary journey, you never quite know what you're going to get. Hey there, Madlit enthusiasts. Our podcast is sponsored by the esteemed Baker Publishing Group. Whether you're into heartwarming romance, gripping suspense, or deep dives into matters of faith and society, Baker Publishing Group has it all. With Revell and Bethany House publishers under their umbrella, they bring you a diverse array of books that will captivate your mind and stir your soul. Check out all of their line at www.bakerbookhouse.com. Hey everyone, it's Jaime Wright here at Madlit Musings, and I have Kit Tosello with us today. Hey Kit,
Hi, good to see you.
good to see you too. I'm happy to have you here. Um, and for those of you who are just chiming in here on Madlit Musings, one of the things that's a little bit different about this podcast is my poor guests do not get a list of questions to prepare for. We just kind of have this whole like kick back, relax, let's chat like we're in a coffee house type of thing. And we never quite know where the conversation's going to take us, but that's kind of what
Love
makes
it.
it real, right?
Love
Right.
it.
So we will talk about your book today. We always use books to kind of like start off the conversation.
Okay.
And sometimes we stick with the book, and other times, I don't know, I've talked about everything from Barbie dolls to serial killers
Hmm.
to flannel graph back in Sunday school. So you just don't know where we're going to go.
Okay.
So, you game?
Game.
Tell me your
Game
deepest,
on.
darkest secret. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
Well,
let me give that some thought.
okay. Okay, this is fun. So, you are probably not well known by our readers simply because this is your very first book that's being
Correct.
released into the bookshelf world. So, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So, The Color of the Home is a story mainly of Audrey, and Audrey is a 28-year-old interior designer from the Bay Area. So
Mhm.
her clientele is, high end Silicon Valley mansions and remodels and often pretentious clients. And her boss is also extremely hard to please. So she is kind of on her last nerve, but she's just kind of stuck in a rut of she can't see beyond this for a new dream.
Mhm.
And then her great aunt, who's like a grandmother figure to her. Her name is
Okay.
Daisy, and Daisy has a POV in the book also. And Daisy is she lives in a small town in Central Oregon called Charity Falls, a fictionalized town that's up
Okay.
against the Cascade Mountains.
Oh, gorgeous. I love that
So it's sweet
area.
towns,
Mhm.
quirky people, and she's beloved there. She's retired now, but she's a great baker and known for that. And she's also a woman of very deep and tried faith.
Okay.
She's been through a lot. She's been through a lot of deep loss,
Mhm.
but now she's facing her husband is descending into Alzheimer's, and
Mhm.
they need to move to assisted living. So she connects with her niece and they used to have a really good connection, the two of them.
Mhm.
And she asks um, Audrey at probably the worst time in Audrey's career, she asks Audrey to help her kind of sort through the house and get
Yeah.
it ready for sale.
Yeah.
And Audrey agrees to this, and it's only meant to be for a couple of weeks. And she does put her career on hold and at great, you know, potential peril.
Right. Right. There is never a good time for that transition, really,
Right.
because it's such a severe transition for the people moving from their independence into assisted living. So it's not just, hey, we're moving to a new house. It's a major life change for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. And in her case, they've lived in this home. They've lived in this home well. They've really lived there
Yeah.
for many decades. And just to try to, even with her established faith,
Hmm.
to she's letting go of her husband at the same time she's letting go of
Mm.
everything that
Yeah.
um, is normal to her.
Yeah.
And so in walks Audrey, and it's just really the dynamic between the two women is really interesting, and an encouragement to both of them. Obviously, they have a lot to learn,
Yeah.
and to reestablish their connection and their love of things like talking about books. They do a lot of
Mhm.
that, like they did when Audrey was younger. So there's
Yeah.
some, you know, book references, little Pride and Prejudice thrown in there, little Jane Austen. Can't help
Mr.
myself.
Darcy always has to make an appearance in
Yeah.
every book somehow. Somehow.
So I do. I actually kind of talk a bit about a one of another Austen title that's a little less talked about. So I won't mention what that is, but
Okay.
we go into that a little bit. That's fun. Um, so Audrey agrees and to come up and as I say, it's only meant to be temporary,
Yeah.
but the circumstances happen so that she ends up having to stay longer, and she's at the same time she's getting involved with emotionally invested in the community, especially in the
Okay.
life of a young girl who is her father's incarcerated. She finds out, and Audrey has a heart for her. And then also across the street from where Daisy lives in this cute little house, the one on the cover ish, is this uh, it was a bed and breakfast
Okay.
slash dude ranch kind of thing when Audrey was growing up. And so every summer she got to spend time there, this idyllic summer, with
Mhm.
horses and that kind of thing. But now she looks at it and it's fallen into disrepair. And it's also where the tragedy with her father happened when she was
Okay.
a teenager. And so she
Okay.
hasn't been back since then. And that's something that she has to reconcile as well.
Yeah. Wow, there's so many like loose ends in that. It's just really the story of life in a fictional
Yes.
form.
It is. I mean,
Yeah.
um, I think all of us at some point have to face some sort of life interrupting, whether it's
Mhm.
a tragedy, a loss, a trauma, and we all kind of develop our own
Right.
coping methods that aren't always necessarily
Mhm.
super helpful. And so she's at a place in life where she's going to have to unpack that, because
Yeah.
for her it's really been about focusing on performance and
Mhm.
the next thing, and to the exclusion of all else,
Right.
relationships and that kind of thing. So
Right.
finding out again that, can the small life be a good life
Right.
is a question, I would
Right.
say.
Well, that's a good question too, because you think about the stages that we go through in life, and watching my children getting to their teens, and now they're starting to go, oh, what do I want to be when I grow up, and all of that. And so much of the world is about building success and career, and then all of a sudden you hit this age when you're like, do I care?
Yeah.
Is that what's important? And then you look at the older
Yeah.
character in your book, and she's like losing what's most important, like her husband and her relationships and home.
Right. Right. And Audrey hopefully will discover it for the first
Yeah.
time herself.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's tricky as parents, isn't
It
it?
is. It
Because
is.
we can't help encouraging our kids to go for their dreams,
Right.
and to find out what they're good at, and to
Hmm.
pursue things.
Hmm.
But there's also this balance that sometimes I think it takes some maturity to
Yeah.
get to the point where we start to look at, oh, how do I balance that with things that are really meaningful?
Right. Right. And what other priorities? I was talking to a young lady, and I was like, what do you want to be as you're looking at college and stuff coming up? And she's like, I just want to go somewhere where I can make bucks.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh." And I think she was partially joking, so whatever, but it hit me like there are so many people her age that are looking at their future, and it is very much wrapped up in a culture of success and
Yeah,
not necessarily fame, but security and safety in the
yeah,
tangible at the expense of relationships.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's a quote that Daisy says at one point. She says, kind of to Audrey, she says, "Honey, the unexpected life is our actual life." And so,
Mm.
and I heard recently Nancy Ortberg said, we don't get the story that we would pick or something, some variation on there.
Right.
We we there's a wake up call where we realize we don't get to write our own story. And for me, that's kind of been the exciting part of the journey, is learning to trust God with my story, and like, oh, maybe he could write a better one than anything that I would dream up.
Yeah. And don't you love it when God throws the unexpected at us?
Oh yeah. Yes and no.
Yeah. I was like, "What
In
are
the
you
aftermath.
thinking?" And he goes, "Well, I am thinking."
Yeah.
And that's about all he tells me. I'm like, "Well, good. I'm glad you're thinking, Lord."
Hindsight is 2020, and
It
it is
is.
beautiful though when we see the ways that he, even the hard stuff,
Mhm.
um, that he just doesn't waste anything.
Right. Right. Yeah. He doesn't waste anything. It's interesting because I think your book to me hits a chord when you're talking about the inclusion of someone who's descending into Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
and then the aunt who's having to work with that. And my dad has Alzheimer's. And so
Mhm.
each day you're descending into it a little bit deeper, and it's a little bit darker and a little bit shadowier. But yet the memories that we're still making and the neat things that are still happening, you can see God weaving through my dad's story. Like my dad's story
Oh,
is
gosh.
shifting, but it's not over and it's not wasted,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I think, there's beauty in that. And
Hmm.
there's beauty in that you will look back and it'll probably look even more beautiful
Yeah. Yeah.
at some other time on your journey. But
Right.
um,
Right.
yeah, it's a common thing that seems like more and more of us are having to deal with our parents. And
Yep.
yeah.
Well, I think part of it is too, we hit that age. It's funny because there was a time when all of my friends and I were like, oh, little children, because that's the stage we were in. And now it seems like all the messages going back are like, so my mom called today. It's all this
Yeah.
care of people that you weren't expecting to have to care for.
Yeah.
And it never comes at a time where you've got it perfectly etched into your schedule. Right.
Hmm.
And I think you said that your character finds that out too.
Yeah, for sure. And even Daisy with her, maturity and wisdom,
Yeah.
um, feels a little blindsided,
Mm-hmm.
that life happens so fast, and
Yeah.
it's time for the next season.
Right, right. Okay, so your main heroine, you said, is kind of in the industry though, as far as like design and boutique and chic and all these terms I don't know because I'm a country girl. So I'm like, I don't even know the terms, but tell us a little bit about that because that's got to be like, do you have experience in that world yourself, or how do you write that? If you're,
Yeah.
because
So
I couldn't.
okay. Well, I have, yeah. So I was a
Okay.
kitchen designer for many years. So I was in that world, and actually in California. I spent a lot of time in San Francisco Bay Area, even though I lived
Okay.
south of there. So yes, I can relate to a
Mm-hmm.
wide variety of types of clients
Sure.
um, that you want to impress,
Mm-hmm.
and the pressure that comes with that. I can relate to the panic attacks that my
Mm-hmm.
character is, um, you know, experiencing at, at a certain age in my life, when that was
Mm-hmm.
something that I dealt with. How that intersects with being in the public eye, and having expectations on you and that sort of thing, that's a real
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and Audrey, she has a real kind of a niche within the interior design world, where she has a really good eye for color. And it's really great to have
Okay.
somebody on staff who has that you can go to, even in the kitchen design world.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that I enjoyed too, color. So
Mm-hmm.
the title, there is a tie in there,
I
because
like that.
yeah, so Audrey, she actually sees the world in Pantone colors of the year. So she'll spy
Hmm.
a woman's, bold mustard purse and think, I think that was mimosa and that was Pantone's color of the year in such and such a year or whatever.
Wow.
And so it's also about her just exploring that side of herself, that creative
Mhm.
side of herself, and what it means to her apart from her career.
Mm. Okay, so here's a question for you. When you think about the creative part of yourself, and then you think about family, how do you think creativity and family work together to build a story?
Ooh,
It's an interesting question
It
because
is.
it's I shouldn't say it is an interesting question. It's a question that's in my head that is
Yeah.
interesting me.
Okay. I think, yeah, and I don't know if this is at all what
No,
you're asking,
go for it.
but what I went to was all the years when I had kids. We have 3 kids, and they're
Mhm.
all now adults from age 25 and up. But when I was raising kids and we also had small businesses, there was a time in life when we had 3 small businesses and
Wow.
2 small children and 1 on the way, that
Oh,
was the
wow.
epitome of, but life was just so full, sometimes too full, and, you're always
Mhm,
striving for that balance.
mhm.
You can't find the balance, but,
Right.
um, I think back and I think, "Why didn't I read more? Why didn't I write during those seasons?" And, I feel like I didn't actually kinda miss the writing part so much because I was always working with my kids on some creative level
Okay.
with their schoolwork or
Yeah.
nurturing their creativity. Um, so I don't think that's what you were asking,
No, it
um,
is, it is,
but
because
it is part of the parenting life. There's a lot of creativity involved.
yeah. Well, and it is kind of along the lines of what I was thinking, because you can be somebody who like your main character in your book, who wants to create, who wants to produce something beautiful. You could be someone like, myself, who's a writer, but then you have small children, and how on earth am I supposed to balance that? And
Right.
so, how do you mesh that need to be creative with the element of the functionality of life and how life is pulling at you from all different angles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That is the trick, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because there's a kind of creativity that's very practical, and then there's a kind of creativity that's also very explorative. And
Right.
I think it's important to balance the two.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, people
Yeah.
like you and I who are
I remember.
professional
Yeah,
creative people.
exactly. Right. And then in so much of my oomph comes from being creative. Like, my husband
Yeah.
wants to go kayaking, and I like to kayak, but I don't come away from it energized. Like,
Yes.
I enjoyed it, but I didn't
Yeah.
use anything creative. And so I feel like I still have to go produce something because
That's
I
why I
haven't.
take my camera everywhere. Like, I would be off
Yes.
on the shore taking a picture of the pretty colored
Hmm.
kayaks laying upside down like a
Hmm.
rainbow. You
Yeah,
know, I have
exactly.
to do it.
Yes, I agree. My husband and I, like, when we were first married before we had kids, we would go out to Montana all the time, and he liked to fly fish. And when you're on a stream or a river fly fishing for 8 hours, for a sportsman, that's wonderful. For someone like me, I'm like, my brain is going into, like, it's melting. It's dying a slow death of boredom.
Right.
And he finally discovered one day, if I get this woman a camera, she can last 8 hours. And so he
Nice.
got me a camera, and I have thousands of pictures of rocks and
Oh,
flowers and blades of
rocks.
grass. But it was great. It was
Yes.
great.
Every rock is different, Jamie.
Yes, it is.
As the sunlight hits it and
Uh-huh.
the
Uh-huh.
water. Mhm.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I have a shelf of rocks in my house. My husband's
This was
like,
me as a kid.
"Yeah, yeah."
I need
Did
to
you
do it
collect
again.
rocks? Did you
Oh,
collect
yeah,
them?
I had a rock polisher.
Ooh,
Yeah, and
nice.
I would I would have little pieces of rock, and I would look them up, and I would label them, what kind of rock they were, igneous.
Wow.
So
You were a hardcore rock collector there.
I was. It was
That's
brief,
awesome.
but it was hardcore.
That's great. I was moving a container in my son's room the other day, and you know how you bend over and you're expecting it to weigh one thing and then
Oh,
it's not. And I reached down, I picked it, I'm like, oh my goodness, what is in this thing? And it was all filled with rocks, just rocks. And I'm like, I can't even say anything because
yeah.
every rock had a purpose. So,
Hey, I guess, there is an application as an
okay.
adult.
Yes.
I'm really into, like, moving rocks around in my garden. Like,
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
have some border rocks, and
Yep.
I'll put
Yep.
different ones that fit differently in different colors, and that's creative
Yes.
and fun and
Yes.
rocky.
Yes. And that's kind of like flower gardening. I
Yeah,
find myself every year adding a little bit more to my deck atmosphere to make an aesthetic. And then
yeah,
my husband's like, he's the practical one. So this is where it's like you have creatives and then you have the practicals. And he's like,
and
why do you
yeah,
keep buying flowers for the deck? And I'm like, because they're beautiful. And he goes, and they draw the bees. if we didn't have the flowers, we wouldn't be dodging bees. And I'm like,
But nobody would wanna be outside because
but
it
who,
wouldn't be
yeah,
enjoyable.
like, who's gonna sit outside on a
I'm on
plain
your
wood
team,
deck?
Jamie, but
Thank you.
my husband would yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely have that push-pull balance
Yeah,
on
it's the yin and
practicality too.
yang. Yeah, yeah. We were talking about a bathroom situation last night and things we needed to do to not redesign it so much, but make it more functional. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, if we could do this, then it would look prettier." And he goes, "But why? Why? We're not worried about how it looks. We just need to make." I'm like, "But we are." And he's like, "Why are we looking at how it looks?" And I'm like, "Because it's pretty." Can't give you any other functional, logical reason that it's pretty.
I mean, and yeah,
Yeah,
and an interior designer would say we start with, like, what our husband asked, like, how is this room supposed to function? How do we
right.
want this room to function now?" And that changes all the time. Kids
Mhm,
move out, and we're like, "Oh, how
right.
do we want this space
Exactly.
to function?" So there is a practical side of it that you
Mhm,
can involve him in and then,
mhm.
you know, give and take.
And then nudge him out so that I can decorate,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We wanna be here.
I love it. I love it. So you're definitely a creative then, as evidenced by the fact that you designed kitchens, which is way cool.
That was pretty interesting because I just fell into it.
Okay.
I was going to college to be a nurse, which I would have made a terrible nurse. I just thought it was very, you know,
It's
it
what you
was just
do.
a
You
you
pick
know,
a career.
admirable.
Right.
But I quit school and worked for a while, and I went to work for this lumber company and this was in the mid 80s,
Okay.
and they had a home center before there was like a Home Depot or Lowe's or any of that
Oh,
in
sure.
our area.
Mhm.
They had a kitchen design center and I sold appliances um and they trained me to do we sold like modular kitchen cabinets. So
Oh,
there was,
sure. Yeah.
there were set sizes and that kind of thing. And math comes pretty naturally to me. So it was all hand drawn at that time. It was graph paper,
Oh my
and we had to
goodness.
do. I learned to draw like not just elevations, but draw a room on perspective. From this corner over here,
Wow.
how would everything angle? And then, I met my husband, and we got into businesses together. His
Mhm.
family, Italian family bowling centers. But then when we
Oh.
went out on our own, had some other businesses, and just started having babies.
Mhm.
Then when I went back into kitchen design, several times over the years,
Okay.
um, the first time there was a very simplified kind of computer program that I learned to
Okay.
use.
Mhm.
And then later, once we moved to Oregon, I went to work for a really custom cabinet shop. They did beautiful work, furniture, and I learned CAD drawing
Yep.
there, and even
Mhm.
got to design the details of built-in tables and really beautiful things.
Ooh. Wow.
So that was there. Yeah, there was. I enjoyed that more than the actual sometimes customer service end of it. Some people were lovely. Don't get me wrong,
Yes.
but there was at that time a big boom going on
Okay.
in Bend, Oregon, and
Mhm.
this was before the market took a
Crashed.
major
Yeah.
tumble in
Yep.
2009.
Right.
And at that time, there was a lot of outdoing each other. There
Mhm.
was,
Mhm.
there were butlers' pantries and wine cellars and lots of extras. So
Meanwhile, for those listening, Jamie has a Rubbermaid crate with some wine bottles in it, and that's her wine cellar. I'm classy, I'm telling you.
yeah, yeah. And we live in a very simple house that's actually super quirky and yeah,
Yeah.
but
That is one of the things I love about visiting people's homes, though. It's not to judge or criticize them. It's just to see how the home is a reflection of the personality types inside. And it's like the home is kind of like a visual picture of the family, right?
yeah,
And so,
yeah.
yeah, my wine cellar is a Rubbermaid, crate, and then I serve if you come to my house, we'll have wine on the deck, and I'll give it to you in a mason jar, right? Because
I love that.
I don't have anywhere to put wine
Same here.
goblets. I've got like 3 cupboards and that's it, right?
Yeah.
But that's just how I do life. And then I go to my friends.
That's my style anyway.
Oh,
I
perfect.
and you know what, back to the book, Audrey
Yeah.
is dealing with something that I had to deal with, and that was that actually when I stepped away from that world of kind
Mm.
of high-end stuff, um, I felt like I was taking a mask off, and I
Oh,
didn't even know I
interesting.
was wearing,
Okay.
because when you're selling things to somebody that you don't necessarily even really desire yourself, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like, I'm a
Yeah.
simple girl. I'm a
Sure.
mason jar girl too.
Sure.
So, yeah,
You do. You kind of adopt what is a trend or what is the expectation.
yeah, and I could appreciate it, and I really
Mhm.
enjoyed
Oh, yeah.
creating it,
Yeah.
um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, when I sat on my friend's deck that overlooked a mountain range and there was a sunset and we had these luxurious wine goblets and everything was just crystal and beautiful. Trust me, I totally enjoyed it.
sure,
But
yeah,
I didn't rush home and buy a whole bunch of wine goblets and move
right,
to a mountain range.
or yeah, change your whole life
Right.
trajectory to earn your way into that,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm. So I think as we come full circle in our randomness of conversation here, I think one of the things that's interesting and is really something the readers will connect with your book, which is once again called The Color of Home, is really how each person in that novel contributes to a family unit that creates home in whatever picture or whatever format that becomes for them.
yeah, 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 and it's not really about the spaces
Hmm.
that we live in.
Right.
It's the people that we live with
Hmm.
and not even, necessarily blood relation, just
Right.
um we can make a family in our community in a lot of different
Yeah.
ways.
Absolutely.
And that is, for me anyway, that's a lot more life giving
Yeah.
than the fancy house on the hill.
Amen. But if you have a fancy house on the hill, enjoy it.
Nothing wrong with it.
I'm just gonna throw that out there too.
Yeah.
But
Invite
yeah,
me over.
yeah, invite me over too, because my house ain't fancy.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, the book is called The Color of Home. It releases September 24th from Revell Publishing. So we are sisters from Baker Publishing Group. So that's always fun.
Yeah,
And
they've
this,
been great.
yes, they have. They're great. They're absolutely great. This is a book that has been endorsed by best-selling and award-winning author Melody Carlson. She says that you have richly layered scenes, intriguing characters, and a compelling story.
How nice is that?
That's pretty high praise there. So
I made my
own
day.
that. Yes.
Made a
And
couple of days.
you got one of my personal literary heroes to endorse your book, Robin Jones Gunn. And she says that Kit has a winsome way of using words to paint heart-touching images. I love that. I love that.
She's a sweetie. Oh man.
She
Yeah,
is.
I admire her greatly.
Yeah, Robin is absolutely astounding. So
Yeah.
well, if readers want to follow you, Kit, get to know you some more, pick up your debut novel, etc., what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty active actually on Instagram and Facebook. I like that space.
Mhm.
I like taking pictures, as I said, of pretty things and talking about books.
Yeah,
But I also have a newsletter called The Tea because our
I love that.
family owns a loose tea shop. So I tie that in when I do giveaways through my newsletter. A lot of books and tea giveaways and news. All that is available on my website. You can find all those links really
Awesome.
easily.
Awesome. And now all the tea drinkers that are listening are going to rush to sign up because tea giveaways is like a perfect
Yeah.
enticement to sign up for a
Yeah.
newsletter.
We just have one business now and we've had it for almost 10 years and
Yeah.
it's tea.
Oh, I love that. I do love tea. Everybody knows me for coffee, but I do drink tea and it's good. It's good.
And I occasionally drink coffee still. It
Hey,
doesn't like me very much, but we used to have a coffee house too. So
see, I think you and I
uh,
are kindred spirits in a lot of
equal
ways.
opportunity.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I
Drink
love
shop.
it. Well, Kit, this has been an absolute joy to have you, and I'm so excited to see your book hit the shelves and hear readers' thoughts. And obviously, you have a heart for reaching people with encouragement and the truth. So, thank you so much for your writing, and we'll
It's
have you
my
on
pleasure.
again.
This was fun.
This
Thank
was
you
a
for having me,
blast.
Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you for joining Madlit Musings, where every conversation is a journey and every book is a new adventure. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast player or check us out on YouTube, and let's explore the fascinating intersection of faith, society, and storytelling together.